Well, folks, I was watching some of my videos that I have been making on this Scrub Cadet, and I noticed that I haven't taken a lot of pictures of myself, and really that was sort of on purpose. I'm a little bit camera shy, but I'm gonna try to do better and start having more pictures so you can actually see me talking instead of me pointing to things. With that said, I got one thing I want to point to, and here it is. We got more issues with the Scrub Cadet. At the end of the video, or what I thought was going to be the end of the video, you saw me doing a little bit of mowing out here in my backyard, and then the old Cadet run out of gas right there on the hill. I put gas in it, cranked up, no problem. But as I was mowing, I thought, man, this thing sounds sort of loud. It just don't sound right to me. My lawnmower is 25 or 20 years old, and it ain't nowhere near as loud as that thing right there with 60 hours on it. It sounded like a thrashing machine, and I was getting some vibration too. So I thought, well, crap, I better check into that and see what's going on before I take it back to mama. So what I did, I took the belt off all the pulleys, and before or right after I got done shooting that video, I took all the blades off and sharpened them, and changed the oil in it, and did all that. And I thought, well, I'm gonna give it another go. So I went up and mowed around the front of my house up there, and it still, man, it made the awfulest noise you've ever heard. So I decided I'd put it on my makeshift lawnmower lift here, my good old trusty 586 case forklift that I use for the business to pick up logs with. Makes a great lawnmower lift. Put a strap on each end. I'm 50 years old. I can't get down on the ground no more. Plus I'm fat, and that makes it hard on a fat man getting on the ground. So, but anyway, I lifted this up. Now I want to start with this blade here. This is on, if you're on the lawnmower, this will be on the far right. I'm going to spin this blade. I want you to listen to it. Did you hear it? I didn't either. That's why that blade is good. That spindle is good. There's nothing, no issue with that one. All right, we're gonna go over here to this one. And by the way, these are the thinnest lawnmower blades I believe I have ever seen on a lawnmower. They're not even an 1/8 inch thick. That's crazy. But anyway, I'm gonna spin this one next. So listen to this. Hear that? That's a bearing starving for grease. All right, so we've gone from quiet to louder. Now listen to this one. That one is probably a burn up bearing with 60 hours on this lawnmower. I can't believe it. What you pay for these days, MTD, which we call them mini troubles daily, is really stood for machine tool and die. And they build these mowers, and they've been building mowers for years. I used to work for Lowe's, and when I was 18, I worked in the Lowe's store, and we sold MTD lawnmowers. And I'm 50 years old now, so y'all can do that math. And you know, they wasn't the best lawnmower. There wasn't a John Deere, or back then you could still get a Cub Cadet or a Simplicity or something like that. But they would get the job done. I mean, they wasn't bad. It was probably I don't know, 4 or 5 year old mower. This is 1 year. 1 year. I have seen mowers that was 10 years old and the bearings didn't sound like that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to take the blades back off. We're going to zip out. There's 4 bolts up here. Sorry. Right there's another one. We're going to take his spindle off. And I'm going to take it over to the bench. And we're going to do a little dissecting and see what's going on with those bearings. My guess is they're having very little grease in them, if any. If they've got grease in them, it's probably the wrong kind of grease. And it's got hot and more than likely just ran out of it. But this is pathetic. So let's see what happens. All right, we got the spindle off and got it over here in the vise in the junked up garage. And here's what I mean by junked up garage. Now I've got a brand new toolbox right there, and you look, see that piece of cardboard leaning against it. The reason for that, there's a cat that comes around here. Look at those drawers on that toolbox. I bought that toolbox, it was used, and it wasn't in bad shape. And that cat has peed all over those drawers and made them rust. And so I'm not going to let it happen on my new toolbox here. So that's why I got that cardboard there. Problem is I can't use none of the bottom drawers until I box in this place. And hopefully that's going to be happening pretty soon. I've got to jack up this corner of the building right here. It's a little low. But while we're back here, I thought I'd just show you my mower. It's a Gravely 260Z. And I kind of have it, I guess you'd say, pimped out. I got a canopy on it and a Pico on it. I even got my sprayer on the front of it. And that's handy. I keep a little bit of spray in that tank, so when I'm mowing, if I've got some weeds I see coming up in a flower bed or something, I take care of it right then. But the spindles on my mower, in 20 years, I have replaced that spindle right there. I believe it is. No, let me back up. I replaced each spindle, this one and the one on the other side. I've replaced them one time. And those are sealed bearings. The ones that's in the spindle and the vise that we're working on now, they're sealed bearings. The difference is the grease, is what kind of grease they run in it. This grease over here and the one that's on the table in the vise, I don't know if there's any grease left in it. That's what we're going to find out. I like to use for bearings that right there. That is high speed wheel bearing grease. It's blue. I got it off of Amazon. That's good stuff. I use that in my trailer that I haul logs on. But let's tear into this, see what happens. Alright, first of all, you can tell this thing's not very old. It's still got a stupid barcode sticker on the pulley. If it had any age on it, that'd be gone a long time ago. But the way this comes apart, I just took an impact, loosened the nut, lay it on my golf cart. It's the best workbench I got. Pull the pulley off. It's got this little collar here, and what that does is the pulley, you'll see it when I pull this off, it spaces the pulley off of the spindle, and it lets the pulley go down on these splines. So when the belt turns the pulley engages those spines and turns the actual spindle. Then it's got this dust collar. Then we get into the meat and potatoes, as I say. And I can already see one thing I don't like. That's this style of bearing. This is a sealed bearing, but it's got on this one side, and I bet it's like that on the other side, it's got this steel cover in it. I don't like sealed bearings like that. I like the ones that's got the rubber in it. The reason why, I can take a pick and peel that rubber seal off that sealed bearing, and I can repack the bearings like that. And I've done that a lot. Actually, one of the bearings on my mower back there, I said I've had to replace the 2 spindles on the outsides, and I have. I've never replaced the bearing on the spindle in the middle, and it got a little stiff and was making a little bit of a roaring noise about a year ago. And so that was after 19 years. I can get that. I understand that. So I peeled it apart just like I did this, and I repacked that bearing full of that blue grease that I just showed you right there, and it's fine, no problem. When they get to be a problem is when they're completely out of grease and the balls in it destroy the inner bearing, and that's when it flies apart. The balls locks up, it gets hot, the balls locks up, they what we call galled together, and then your shaft starts wobbling and bad things. So we're going to get this shaft out of this now. Here it is on the other end. And the way this comes apart, you got to drive this shaft down. Now, I know it's very tempting to take a hammer and just start whacking on that shaft. And believe me, I have done that many times. And sometimes I would get mad and do it. But every time I live to regret it. So the correct way to do this, or a correct way I should say, is take the nut, run it back down on the shaft. I like to leave it up just a little bit. Some people run it down flat. Problem with that is if you're using a hammer and you're hitting the edge of it, you will brad the end of that shaft into the threads. You won't be able to get the nut off. I like to leave it up just a hair. Then you take your hammer, start tapping on it. Now, since this thing only has, what, 53 hours on it, 54 hours, I could about knock that out with my hand. If it had a lot of hours on it, that would be very hard to get out. It's actually got a little bit of wobble in it. So let me get it out and we'll peel it apart and see what happens. Well, we got this spindle disassembled and I have found something interesting. Number one, this is a collar that goes in between the bearings down in the spindle. Look at the rust on that. Now, I think I know what's causing that. But water is no good for bearings. That's another thing that I don't like about this kind of bearing. They're not very waterproof. They don't really intend for you to mess with this bearing at all with that metal top ring in there. But that's the top bearing. Look at the bottom bearing. That's all rust, dirt, and it has ruined the bearing. I can feel it. This other bearing still spins freely. It would probably be okay. This bearing, it takes more to turn it, and when you turn it, you can feel it almost like it's clicking, but it's not. It's hitting a dead spot. So I'm going to disassemble this bearing, and I think you destroy them when you disassemble them, but I'm going to put different bearings in it anyway. I'm just going to order some bearings. The bearings like I like. In fact, hold on. All right, guys, I knew I had one in here somewhere. It took me a few minutes to find it in this junk hole. But here is a roller guide off of my sawmill. And what this does is where the saw blade, I got a whole bunch of them right over here. These are new ones right here. Here's one that's coiled up. The saw blade runs against that guide. The flange on the back of it, the back edge of the blade, it's actually supposed to be off of it just a little bit. And then when you enter a log, it pushes the saw blade back into that flange. And then this turns. This roller guide turns with that saw blade. The sawmill the blade is turning somewhere around 5,300 feet per minute. Now, if anybody knows their math and miles and things like that, a mile is, I believe, 5,280 feet. So that sawmill is turning the blade a mile a minute. That's on these little bitty bearings inside this thing. A mile a minute. They are screaming. And the smaller the bearing, the more heat it's going to put out. I mean, it's going to turn so fast. A big bearing, you can turn them fast, but a small bearing, a lot of small little electric motors and things like that have small bearings in them, and gosh, they can turn some RPMs. But anyway, what I wanted to show you is this right here. See that black ring in there? That's actually like a piece of rubber. That's seal. And what I do with these wheels is every so often I'll take the bearings out and I'll take a pick and I'll pick that seal out. If you're real careful, you can do it and not damage it. I've done it many times. You can pick that seal out, and then you can see the ball bearings underneath of it. And I'm going to pull this out and then show you what I'm talking about. Now, I just went ahead and decided it'd be easier just to go ahead and knock these bearings out and show you what I was talking about. So they come out by knocking them down that way. And when you take bearings out of something, they make special tools that you can use to take them out with. But sorry, I'm holding the phone open and pocket knife too. You know, guys, I'm gonna get off topic just a little bit. I'm already off topic, but I'm gonna get off a little further in the weeds. If you're working on something, right there is the best tool you can own, is a pocket knife. I got a good friend, his name's Dean Hobbs. He carries a little bitty adjustable wrench, a pair of channel locks, a pocket knife, a flashlight. He's a walk-in toolbox. And anytime we're working on something together, he'll pull out one of them things and go to wrenching on it, and it's just handy to have. But I'm not that smart. I just keep a pocket knife, and if you don't have one, buy you a good pocket knife. Preferably buy you one that's got a good tip on it. Mine, I've worked on it quite a bit. And Case is a good pocket knife. My grandpa carried Case pocket knives. I've carried Case pocket knives. They're just a good tool to have. But anyway, getting back on semi-topic. Right down in here, when you drive bearings out, this right here is called the inner race. That little bit of metal, that metal ring. Over here, you can barely see just a little bit of metal right in there. That's called the outer race. When you're driving bearings out, very important, don't beat on the inner race, because what you're doing, you're actually beating on the bearings inside of it. You want to get something that you can get on and hit the outer race. So the best thing to use, in my opinion, is just get you a socket and find something that's close to the size of the hole, like that. Then just take your hammer. Brass hammer's better. I've got one, but I ain't gonna fool looking at it or looking for it. And you just take your time, and every now and then stop and look and see it's starting to come out. It'll probably come out and fall in the dirt. I can feel it coming out. I'm gonna stop right there. That will actually show you what I'm trying to show you. But anyway, if you keep hitting like I was hitting on it, you eventually would pop this bearing right out. Now, getting back to, before we take this bearing out, getting back to these, especially that one. I said a minute ago that I knew what caused that, and I do. Water is what caused that. Water has got into the spindle and got down into that bearing, mainly because This is not, it's considered a sealed bearing, but it's not sealed like this bearing. Water can get into this bearing, but it's a lot harder than getting into that one. My mom, bless her heart, that woman, she wants to wash lawnmowers the best of anything I've ever seen. And she tries to take care of stuff, and I can't fault her for that. But I think what has happened is she's been trying to wash the grass out from underneath her lawnmower, and it's got water in these spindles. Now, one other thing, grass, most people, including me, I like to have a pretty yard if I can. This is my backyard, and I've got some spots in it, spotty spots, and mainly that's where I regraded this several years, and there's a lot of washing that goes through there, and it hasn't filled up. But anyway, I like my yard to look green and full and pretty. Most people do. Well, what they do, they put fertilizer on it. That's what I do. And if you throw fertilizer out on the ground and it never rains on it, it'll lay there for months. I actually fertilized my lawn out here one summer. No doubt. Early one spring, I'm sorry. And that fall, the fertilizer was laying on the ground. That's how little rain we had. I think I mowed my lawn 2 times the whole summer. It was extremely dry. But if you put water on fertilizer, it activates it. It melts it, I guess is a good way to say it. And the chemicals in fertilizer is highly corrosive, extremely corrosive. And that's what's happened right here. The grass has got the fertilizer in it, the clippings. The grass is eating the fertilizers, it's using it for energy. And the clippings has the fertilizer in it. Well, what happens when you squirt water on that mowing deck that's got all those grass clippings on it? The water gets into any place possible, and this is what happens. Now, going back to this sawmill bearing for just a second. My bearings, ever so often, I'll take this out like I'm getting ready to show you, and I'll pack it full of grease. The company that builds my sawmill, Woodmizer, and I'm working on a video to go over some stuff on the sawmill, and this is a very touchy subject what I'm getting ready to talk about. They say to use water as blade lubricant. They're saying to use it to keep the blade cool. I guess what you'd call a more coolant than lubricant. And I did that when I first got my other sawmill I had. And I'm telling you, within 3 or 4 months, the bolts was rusted in there. I was wringing bolts off. I couldn't get nothing off. I was having bearings to get tight because that water was getting in these bearings. And remember, this thing's turning a mile a minute. So if you do the math, if you run that sawmill, you're not going to run it 8 hours a day, but it is feasible that you could run it solid 4. So at 60 miles times 4 an hour. No, I'm sorry, that math is wrong. That would be 4 hours. It's running a mile a minute, so that's 60 miles an hour. So that's 24 miles that blade is running in 4 hours. I'm sorry. I'm getting old and tired, I guess. I can't do my math. But anyway, that thing is turning a lot. And like I told you, the smaller the bearing, the faster it turns. So that water was getting in there and it was infiltrating the bearing and corroding it. And I was starting to have bearing problems. To make the story short, and I'm rambling, I'm sorry. An old man told me I was having issues with the cutting. And the old man told me, he said, you use some water? And I said, yeah. And he said, throw that away. Use diesel fuel. And so that's what I use now. I use diesel fuel as a lubricant, not a coolant. And that's the trick. And I'll get into that on the sawmill video. But one thing about diesel fuel with your bearings, diesel fuel is what? It's oil. It's a petroleum product. So it's not going to corrode bearings and wash the grease out and stuff like that. I mean, if it was submerged in it, yeah, it wouldn't be good. But for the amount of diesel fuel that's getting on this, on the sawmill, it's not hurting it. But water will ruin bearings. And right there is proof of it. So, I'm going to get out my favorite tool again. And I'm going to try to hold the camera with one hand and pry out this seal with the other hand. And maybe you can watch what I'm doing. So I just take the tip of my knife blade, and right there, I think I've already done it one time. And you just got to get under that little seal, just like that right there. See how I'm under it? And then all you got to do is pop it right out. Now, look how much grease is in that. And I couldn't tell you how long it's been since I actually put more grease in it, but that bearing's just as smooth as glass. It hasn't had no water in it, and it's had maintenance done to it. I just don't remember how long ago. We'll put that back in there, and the way you do it, you just take your fingers and just work it in, and it's back in. These bearings here, you can't really do that. It's got this metal flange around it. Now I'm going to take this one out so we can see what it looks like. I'm going to have to stop the video and do it and then start back, because I know it's going to bend that trying to get it out. But I'm going to go and order tonight enough bearings that's got that kind of seal in it, that rubber seal, to replace these bearings. And in case you don't know how to do that, there's a number on this bearing somewhere. That's part of it right there. I'll clean it up and we'll get the numbers off. It's probably the same number. And you don't have to go back into the manufacturer and buy the bearings that they sell. You can buy them off of eBay. You can buy them off of Amazon. Several places. I have found with that kind of bearing there, even though I'm sure that bearing is a Chinese made bearing, as long as you keep grease in it, it's going to last a long time. I don't care who makes this. This ain't worth a dime. So I'm going to stop the video and we're going to pry this cover off and just take a look inside of it. Well, folks, I got kind of lucky. I was able to get that out. I did bend it a little bit, but it's not bad. I'm thinking I can reuse it and tap it back down in there. It's not as easy to get out as the rubber ones, but it's all right. But anyway, look what I found in there. Now, some people might think, well, that don't look that bad. Look at it compared to that one. This bearing in my hand has got 54 hours on it. This bearing right here has hundreds of hours on it. That's the difference. That's what water will do to your bearings. It's really rough. So I'm gonna try one thing. I'm gonna take some cleaner and I'm gonna clean this bearing and I'm gonna repack it and see what happens. Folks, before I went any further, I thought I'd do a comparison. These two bearings are out of the same spindle, the one we've been working on. This is the one that has all the corrosion from water on it. Now, I washed this one out, but you saw it before I did, how nasty it was. This bearing here is still okay, but I went ahead and peeled the seal off the face of it to see how much grease is in it. So we're going to reveal it now. Can you believe that? Now somebody out there is probably saying, Hillbilly, what's wrong with that? There's hardly no grease in that. That thing should be completely full of grease. A lawnmower with 63 hours on it. I'm sorry, 53, 54 now. I keep getting my hours mixed up because when I started this video series, it had like 53.7, and I forgot and left the switch on a while, and it ticked it up to 54 or something, but it's 54. But there's hardly no grease in that. That's crazy. And these are Uncle Chin bearings. They're from China, just like everything else is. See right there? The great land of China. But my goodness, whoever specs these bearings out for MTD ought to get a boot up the butt for quality control, because when in my last or old life, I should say, working for the corporate world, that was my job. I created specs and had people to build stuff for the company, and you know, I took it upon myself to make sure that everything was done correctly. That is no more than basically pulling greasy parts out of whatever and putting it, assembling it in a bearing. There is no extra grease in there. If there was enough grease in there, you shouldn't be able to see that little divot there in between the cage for the balls. The balls are in these little parts right here at the end of my thumb. That's called the cage. You're not seeing the balls. That's what holds it in there. But that's crazy. They should be ashamed of themselves. Well, folks, I'm back out here at the junked up garage. I did take time to kind of clean me off a little section on my table, so that's a vast improvement. A couple days ago, it was 2 foot tall junk sitting on top of it. So I've been working on that, trying to get me a place to be able to work. I have ordered 6 new bearings, and I'll show a picture of these now. I did get these bearings off of Amazon. They are Chinese bearings, just like the ones that came out of it, so it's no difference in that. I did want to show you, though, the difference in how the old bearing and the new bearing looks. Look how nasty this old bearing is compared to the new bearing. Now, one of the selling features of these new bearings is they got these removable oil seals in them. And this is the kind that I like. I don't like those that's got the metal seals in them like these old bearings had in it. One thing about these bearings, though, it looks like it's got Vaseline in it. That's nowhere near enough grease, and I knew that when I ordered them. That's just the way these Chinese bearings are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pack these with this Kendall Super Blue grease. And when I say blue, it is blue, just like the ocean. And I'm going to show you how I do it. I've never had an issue with packing bearings. I pack wheel bearings, roller bearings like this, any kind of bearing that I've had working on any kind of equipment. I've packed bearings. I've never had trouble with it. So there's all kinds of methods of packing bearings, and everybody has their favorite method, but this is just the way I do it. So let me show you how to do that. All right, first thing you want to do, take your bearing and put it in the tub of grease and get you a nice blob of it and put it in your hand. Try to get it in as much as you can in your hand. You want it in the palm of your hand like that. Then you take the bearing and you scrape it. And you go around and you scrape your hand, and you're taking the ball or palm of your hand right there, I guess you would say, and you're pushing that grease down inside the bearing. And you just do that all the way around. Now this is a very messy job. If you don't like getting your hands dirty and greasy and nasty, you're not going to like this job. So once I get all the way around, then I'll take my thumb and I'll just keep putting grease in that channel where the bearing is, and I'll just keep packing it in. Just pack it in and pack it in. And every now and then it's good to turn the bearing a little bit, so all the balls inside of it is getting a good coat of that grease on it. You can tell right there it can still hold some more. So just keep packing it in, packing it in. So see, I've packed a bunch of grease already in that. It's going, a lot of it's going in there. And if you need some more, you got some in your hand, just do that. You want to get absolutely as much grease in that as you possibly can. Now, when I get it to the point to where I'm done packing, I'll try to rake me some up into where the groove is, the bearing groove, and I'll build it up a little bit. So see how I've got that kind of build up on the bearing groove? Then I'll take my seal and I'll place it back in the bearing. And when I push that seal down in there, you're going to see this grease coming out like that right there. That's telling me that it's got absolutely as much grease in it as it will hold. And that's exactly what I want. And then you want to kind of get the excess off of it. And that's it. And I'll take a towel or something and I'll clean all that up in just a minute. But I got 5 more to go. Okay, now we're ready to reassemble our spindle. I have already driven that top bearing, well, I'm sorry, the bottom bearing. The spindle sits like this, the one deck being here, the blade being here. So this is the bottom bearing. I've already put it in because I had to drive it in. It's a little hard to record and drive to. But like I said before, get something that is close to the same diameter as the outer race of the bearing when you're driving that in. You don't want to beat on the seal or the inner race. That's no good. You can damage the bearing like that. But the way this goes back together, we got the shaft, and this end of the shaft here, it's got this funny looking emboss on it. That goes in the blade. So this is the blade end of the shaft, and this is the pulley end of the shaft. It's got these splines on it. The way this works, shaft goes up in the bearing. It fits up flush to the housing. Then on the other side, these two collars right here are exactly identical. One collar goes down inside of the shaft to act as a spacer. Then we got the top bearing. It slides down over the shaft into the housing, like that. Then we got this dust cap. It fits over the shaft and over the top bearing. Then we got the second collar. Whoops. Then we got the second collar. It fits down over the shaft. Then your pulley has got this coordinating spline made into it that's on the end of the shaft here. It just keys up with that spline like that. And then the nut goes on. And I'll run that nut on with the impact and get it good and tight. But man, it feels good and smooth and good and quiet. We'll check it again once we get the blades back on it. Anyway, I've got 2 more of these to build exactly the same way. All right, guys, I wanted to stop just a minute and show you something. And no, it's not my Milwaukee impact gun. I don't know if you remember or not, but one of the spindles on the Scrub Cadet did not make a noise. It was smooth. This is the bottom bearing out of that spindle. There's hardly no grease in this bearing. It's smooth and it's okay, but I would say within another 50 to 100 hours, this bearing will be locked up and burn up too. So, I mean, if you look right in there, there's no grease in there. It's clean. And that's why I decided to go ahead and replace these bearings too. So, both of these right here are going into file 13. I would much rather have that kind of bearing with that kind of seal than that one. These are junk right here. I hope you heard that. That's probably the last time they'll ever see daylight. Okay, folks, we got our blades back on, spindles back in, blades back on, the old Scrub Cadet. Let's see how it sounds. This is the one that was so loud. And this is the one that was the second loudest. I don't know about you, but I think that's a vast improvement. So we're going to get the belt on, the guards back on, let her down, and give it a test drive. See how it goes. So this time we're going to mow right up here around my front yard. Really, I'm not going to mow at all. I'm just going to turn it on, drive it around so you can hear the difference. It's really dry here already, and here it is, April 30th, 2024. We need some rain. So anyway, see what you guys think. Well, guys, I think that's a vast improvement. I don't know how much you caught it in the phone, on camera how much you could hear, but golly, it's a big difference when you're riding on this thing. It sounded like a thrashing machine before. It's still loud. That's just the way these mowers are. They're loud, but it's a smooth kind of loud instead of a bang, grit, knocking sound. That's the best way I know to describe it. But anyway, I'm gonna call this fixed, and it'll probably be back over here pretty soon with something else tore up on it. All seriousness, I don't intend to defame anyone's product. That's not what my intention is whatsoever. You know, I've got all kinds of stuff, from GMC pickups to Chevrolet trucks to forklifts, Kubota tractors, Bobcat excavator, Woodmizer sawmill. I have to say, out of all of it, the most dependable thing that I have never had a single problem with is my Kubota tractor. It's a 2007. And probably the next thing would be my truck, my pickup, my GMC pickups, a 2500 HD, a 2007 model. It's the one before they started the new emission stuff. I know a lot of people gets off on the internet and they get on these tyrants. Who's got the best truck? Who's got the best lawnmower? Who's got the best tractor? You know, everybody's got their opinion, but I'm gonna tell you what, in my opinion, the best one is the one that's the easiest to work on, because they all tear up eventually. And I'm not in the business to defame anyone's product. I've got some videos coming up on my LT70 Woodmizer. You're going to see some things on it that, in my opinion, was terribly engineered and built. But there's some things on it that are good. I'm telling it like it is. Straight up from an old country boy who works for a living and has to put up with this kind of stuff. But anyway, I appreciate you watching this series. I hope that if you watched the first video I did on putting the glass in the excavator, I'm hoping you can tell a difference in the quality of the recordings. I'm learning a lot as far as how to hold the camera and what to do and what not to do. And right now I'm just recording on my phone, on my iPhone, but I'd like to buy a good camera. And if anybody watches this, if you got any suggestions for a good camera to do this kind of stuff with, just drop me a comment and I would really appreciate that. If you like the channel, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up, and I would really appreciate that. But my name's JB, and thank you for watching. Get out there and fix something. Have a great day.